Welcome to 3PNR. I'm your host, Adam R. Joining me for this episode is Margie Kay, a woman with many hats. MUFON, UNX Network, and author, co-author. Margie, you do it all. How you doing, Margie?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Doing great. I'm glad to have you. Glad to have your time. You imagine it's almost been a year now since we met.
Yeah, it has.
Yeah.
Right before we got the network started, you had me on as a guest.
That's right.
And I said, hey, this guy is great. We need to get him on an X. So
yeah,
I'm glad to have you.
It's been a roller coaster of a year too. I mean, quote unquote disclosure, quote unquote Congress meetings, congressional meetings. You know, they're doing things in the name of they're saying it's in the name of public interest, right? National security. There's a threat. So we'll see what direction that is. Margie, let's start with this. We'll tell everyone, obviously who you are again, and then what projects you have you're working on.
Oh, gosh. I'm a writer. I've written 14 books. I'm working on 3 more right now. They're all geared, most of them are geared towards paranormal. I've got a few in other genres, but it's all nonfiction. I don't believe in fiction. I just can't do it. And I've got 2 documentary films I'm working on right now in Missouri and some surrounding states. And it's all about very strange, unexplained phenomena happening, which of course there's always that going on. I run a specialty contracting business and a forensic investigation company. And I'm hoping that I'm able to sell that next year so that I can just focus on the UNX network 100%. So that's pretty much what I do.
I said this since I met you. I'm like, Margie does everything. It's amazing. And I said this to a few people, with proper resources, Margie she could take over whole countries. It's crazy.
I don't know about that.
You're organized enough. So what did you think about these disclosures and these congressional hearings? What are your thoughts on these?
It's always a little bit disappointing. I mean, we're just making baby steps each time one of these happens. But and I really don't feel like they're going to ever come out and say, oh, yeah, we've been investigating UFOs for 50, 60, 70 years, and we know they're here, and we've been in contact with them, and we're trading things with the ETs. I really don't think that's going to happen. I think the disclosure part has already started, but it's because they're doing it themselves and because more and more people are having encounters. And I'm talking about close encounters. I'm talking about a light in the sky. Right. They are actually having close encounters and having communication with extraterrestrials and interdimensional beings. And that's how disclosure is happening. I really feel that.
Yeah, it's especially when you look at these meetings and when they say things like national security threat and you see a chamber it's basically empty. There's not a lot of acronyms hanging around that. The FBI, CIA, NSA. You're not seeing that.
Yeah.
And the few guys that asked tangible questions were basically silent. Said, well, we'll discuss that in a closed circuit.
Oh, exactly. They just pass that off and they're not going to say anything. And in fact, I highly doubt if they're going to tell the committee anything of real substance, what they really know. I doubt it.
I agree. Even like Bill Clinton, President Clinton, he wanted to find out. And in not so many words did they make it apparent to him that, like, well, you're here 48 years, so you don't have the clearance, And so it makes you wonder how much of UFOs are a good scapegoat. The government, we could work on our stuff, and if anyone calls into question, UFO, right? It's a perfect scapegoat. But at the same time, it's a little irresponsible because you're getting people who are having real events, and you're lumping them in a pile of people and making them look like loons. It's an irresponsible thing to do. The disclosure they're doing, there's no harm in saying, look, they're out there, we don't know what they are. So be it, but when the way they conducted themselves in these meetings, it's almost like, how do you say it? I guess they disclosed while shooting it down at the same time.
Well, yeah, and you could tell that they were withholding information and flat out lying. I mean, it's just so obvious, and everyone knows it. They're not hiding anything from us as far as, years ago, I think, during World War II and after, everybody really trusted the government. Now, nobody trusts the government.
Yeah.
And we know they're lying to us. We just go on about our business, and those of us who are UFO investigators, we're the ones that have boots on the ground, and we know what is happening. So they don't have all the secrets, they don't have all the answers, and they're never going to give them to us.
Yeah, I have Steve Murr on the show pretty often. He's coming on again, in fact, and then this month. And he's one of these guys, every time I have a conversation with him, I don't sleep that night. He makes me think. But he had a good point. He's like, a lot of governments, even if they had the full information, they're not going to disclose all of it for a few reasons. Like, there's still, organized religion, there's fanatics out there. And then I guess, how do you express to the free people, like, well, there's these things here and there's nothing we could do about it. And, that safety net that we have is kind of gone. But at the same time, I think we're getting smart enough to where we should be able to handle this kind of information.
Everyone I talk to says, oh, yeah, even if they've never seen a UFO, they say, yeah, I know they exist. We talk about it all the time. It's no big deal. Why don't they just tell us?
Right. Fair enough. I mean, I've had people of religion on the show too. I don't know if you heard that. I asked some challenging questions, and a lot of it I ask about, their point of view on ufology, and they're very willing to accept the idea that it's potentially us from the future rather than there be life from another planet. They're not willing to subscribe to the idea that somewhere outside of this planet is something intelligent and created by a higher power. That's a representative of a large body of people, which I could kind of see why government would push back on saying, well, don't release the information yet, because these groups of people are going to freak out. Like, what's stopping Tom from killing the neighbor? Well, it's the fear of God. And instead of them making room for the idea that an almighty creator, an architect, if you will, created everything, life everywhere, and there's proving grounds everywhere. It's a strange idea to think that we're worried about people overreacting. I think we're smarter.
I think so too. I think there will probably be a few people who would overreact, some maybe fanatics, you might want to call them. But for the most part, I think 95% of the public would take this and say, yeah, we know. We've known it for years. Because there are a lot of people who have sightings and have experiences that don't tell anyone because of the stigma attached to it still. So if you figure, I just as an example, we had a UFO flap in Kansas City in 2011. We had 97 cases in 30 days. And it was the biggest UFO flap around the world. There was an event where there was something in the sky. It wasn't a UFO, but everyone thought it was. In one particular instance on one night, there were 100 cars at least parked on I-70, which never happens. It's a major highway, pulled over to the side of the road, watching this thing, thinking it was a UFO. Out of those 100 cars, only one person reported it.
Wow.
Okay. So if we take that example, 1% of people report, then it's got to be most of the people in the world have seen something.
I do a lot of off podcast interviews, a lot of people that don't want to share their information publicly. And it reminds me of a guy. I think he said he's a foreman on a construction site. And he was at the site one night, and he's he's a Christian. So his belief system is, God made here alone. And it ruined him. He didn't report it. He called into the show because he heard what I was doing, the religion versus this versus that. So I got in contact via email, and then we communicated via phone call. And it seemed like he was disturbed, like his faith system was called into question, like he was put in a position of doubt. So he was very distraught, depressed, and it affected him and his family. And he didn't. So it makes you wonder how many people see these things and don't report, not just for the ridicule, but what it does to them, right? For their belief system and who they are.
Yeah, exactly. People don't want to deal with it, so they brush it out of their mind. They just say, "Oh, that didn't happen. That didn't." I mean, I've actually had witnesses say they were, and it's usually with an older person, it's usually with a parent or someone older than them, and they both see something together. The older person says, "That didn't happen. I didn't see it. I never want to talk about it again." And the younger person is wanting to know what the heck it is they just saw. And in other cases, we will have several people looking at something and only a few people see it and the other people don't, but they're looking in the same place. Now, that is a difficult thing to explain, except that I think I know why. I think that we all have a vibration. We all have a vibratory rate. And when you reach a certain level of consciousness, then you're able to see more than someone else, maybe. And so there are more and more people now who are waking up and have developed a higher level of consciousness. There's, probably the main reason is meditation. And they see more. They not only UFOs, but other things as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. I say this a lot on the show. I think everyone has the same hardware. Our brains are relevantly the same. Like, in other words, when you buy a computer from the store, it looks the same as every computer pretty much. It's the data that's in it, like the downloads that you get, the software. And it was some time ago, I watched a documentary about athletes and then musicians, like master musicians. And they would do like MRIs on these people and find that they're utilizing parts of the brain, that most people don't. And
exactly.
So when you have people that are seeing supernatural events, is it that their computer has different software, a different download?
Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense to me.
I have to agree with it. And I think one of the reasons that I see things and I do remote viewing is because I'm a musician. I have been my entire life. And that taps into some part of the brain that wakes it up.
Right. So, and not to mention too, women could utilize both halves of their brain simultaneously. Men cannot do that. So.
Oh, that's not true.
I read
there
study.
Are some men who can't.
Oh, maybe. All right. So some men can, but the majority, I read a study, the majority could use both sides of the brain, right? So they could display two different sets of emotions, anger and sadness, in the same time, which allows them to have greater software download and upload. I think that's why there's more women psychics, more women who have the ability to have perception. I mean, for me anyway, that's an explanation. It's not a total explanation, but somewhat of one. And like you said, I hear from people often, groups of people that have seen something outdoors, and only a select few have seen it. And there's one other person like, "Well, I was looking, I didn't see it." And I always think the same thing: you lack the software.
Mm-hmm.
It's peculiar.
No, that's true. That is one way of putting it. I really think if we want to get technical, that it is the psychic center of the brain, which includes the pineal gland. And when that is activated, and there are different ways of doing that, that's when contact happens and really cool experiences happen. See a lot of neat things.
Agreed. And some people want to be like, "Well, that's horseshit. They're making it up," or blah, blah. But here's the reality. There's documentaries of Michael Jordan, food poisoning before a game, a finals, right? Or a semifinal, sick to his stomach, mentally goes somewhere to score and win. Boxers who had injuries. There's a boxer who fought a whole match with a broken jaw, mentally took himself somewhere else. And I example people in sports, right? Athletes, for a reason. These are people that have to use cognitive ability, go to a completely different mental level to perform at a high rate. Now you have Margie Kay. And Margie, she remote views. And for her to do that, she has to go to a different level of psychology, your whole mental state, everything about you. You have to morph.
Definitely.
Right.
Yeah.
Same thing, right? The athlete and what you do, same thing. It's just how so people.
It's called being in the zone.
Right.
When you're an athlete or a musician, they know what I'm talking about. You actually let a higher, actually it's your higher self that comes in and takes over for you and gets you to that higher vibratory rate.
I'm glad you said that, because I just watched a video. I shoot pool. I took by the way, and I took the summer off for myself from the podcast. I played pool, hung out with friends again. I needed it.
That's nice.
But I know a lot of people that play pool that say the same thing. And I saw a video with a guy saying it goes, it's your higher self, exactly the way you said it. This is an athlete conveying that message to other athletes to be your higher self at a frequency.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah.
It's this. That's the sad part, is that people want to cast a label without recognizing what it is that you do, and what you do is not very far fetched. It's just, you have to. It's hard for anyone to be like, well, it's impossible. It doesn't make sense. Have you tried it? No. Why? Well, you have to exercise discipline, and you have to put
obviously
time.
It's not impossible. There are a lot of people who do it.
Right.
It's a matter of being open-minded and accepting and trying, and not being afraid to try something new.
Right. I mean, there's people out there, again, and I put these in parallels for this reason, for the same thing. People that are naysayers are the same people that don't win in sports, because they lack confidence. And even if it's something tangible like softball, they won't do it because you're a naysayer. I always say this: if you're just a naysayer, there's no shot you're going to do anything great. You're going to sit at that average level.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree.
And that's like Margie Kay. When she wants to do stuff, she's running a network, the books. I mean, I try to think about, what could I do what Margie does? I don't think so. That's a lot.
A little bit of it is ADD. I just have to be doing multiple things at once. I cannot be satisfied just focusing on one thing. I know some people can do that, but I can't. And I have to have 2, 3, 4 things going on at the same time. And that's just the way I'm wired. I tried to actually, about 3 years ago, I said, you know what? I'm going to pull back from a lot of things. And I did, but it didn't last very long. I soon found something else to take up that space, take up that time.
But what separates you from the majority is you complete your tasks. You don't just start them, well, we'll see what happens. You actually see them to the end. I commend you for that. That's a big deal. Huge effort.
I do. I do have a way of staying focused on my projects.
And the books.
And
that's I recently had a detective on the show. And he's, 38 years in law enforcement. He's written a series of books, and I was talking to him last night. I'm like, how do you do all this? Where do you find the time and the energy? And so for you and him, there's these rare people that walk around that they build a ton of projects, they stay busy, and they complete them to finish. And that's, again, that's kudos. Not easy to do. So for me, Margie, here in the next upcoming weeks here, I'm going to start talking to more people of experience. Some prefer to be called experiencers. Others prefer, I guess they label themselves as abductees. And there was a third word I forgot already.
Contactee?
I think so. I'm going to say that's it for right now, just to spare the time, but I feel like it was a rarer word. So I'm going to start having more people of experience on. Responsibly, I need to do that. So I'll ask you, because you've spoken to a tremendous amount of people. You have 3 times the experience I will ever have. What do you think the project is for our visitors?
Oh, there's multiple projects. There are multiple visitors from different locations. And I hate to say this to people who think that everything is coming from out there. A lot of it is interdimensional. They're in the same space that we are, and they cross through dimensions once in a while and then go back where they came from to another dimension. But they're not traveling billions of miles across space to get here. So that answers one question as far as people wondering where the heck they came from. I also think that they've been here for millions of years, much longer than human beings, and that there was some creation of humans and hybridization, which is probably an ongoing project. And that's why there are abductions and what you would term medical experiments, and they're keeping an eye on those of us who are a part of that. And on the other hand, they also, some of them, seem to want us to succeed and to improve in many ways. And they do help us do that. Now, I've had direct interaction myself, and I have had extraterrestrials help improve my mind and my abilities. So when somebody tells me something as crazy as that sounds, I've experienced it myself. So, why not? I believe them.
You have to. I mean, here's a reality. Every person that's going to have an experience is not going to have the same experience. Like you said, some of the projects require different subjects, different DNAs, different reasoning. And I had a person once, Margie's like, well, abduction sounds insane. It's crazy to say that. I'm like, well, we've been doing it forever. Like, what do you mean? We abduct animals all the time and conduct experiments. We have full laboratories with all different animals in it, for even as something as innocent back in the day for testing soap. That fast forward to we have a ear growing on a mouse, and we now know to a certainty that we conducted experiments on humans. There's no doubt. There's been declassified documents linking to the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, and Charles Manson. I mean, we now know they were in the hands of some acronyms. Because when you look at Charles Manson's rap record, there's no way that guy went in and out of jail on his charges and just got out. That's crazy. So we do it. It's plausible. As far as a hybrid program, if me and Margie were on our own ship, and I say this a lot, we were on our own ship. We found another planet somewhere else. For us to be able to have a hybrid program, it's not in a lifetime. You're talking millennia. That's
Oh yeah.
That's a long
Absolutely.
period. It's impractical to do it any sooner than so. Not to mention, how entertaining are we? We're also a channel, in my opinion. You know what I mean? Like, there's probably multiple planets with life on it that they observe, and we're one of them. We're the Earth Channel, or whatever title they gave us. It's very interesting here. So there's a lot of factors there. And so for people to condemn other people for speaking their experiences, they don't understand. Anything that you think these things are doing, we do it. They just do it on a grander scale because their technology is that more advanced. But we do all of it here in real time, currently.
Well, people are curious, and they also like to see evidence. It's very difficult for someone to understand what a contactee is going through since they haven't experienced it themselves. I mean, just as an example, my husband is not a contactee, but he has seen enough evidence for my experiences that he believes it. He knows what I am going through. He knows that there is something happening. And that does happen in a lot of cases, but in some other cases, they seem to prevent the spouse or the significant other from seeing or experiencing things. Like they'll knock them out completely, and they're not going to wake up and they don't see what happens.
Perhaps they evaluated that partner, said, look, I don't think they can handle it. I don't think their psychology could handle this. Perhaps it's best we don't let them see fully, right?
Yeah. And they actually usually do that to my husband. In fact, just the other day, I had an event happen, and he was knocked out, and I was pushing him and punching him, and he would not wake up. And I knew something was in the house. And I actually got up and I looked for the gun, and I couldn't find it. And I heard this clicking noise, which is usually associated with a reptilian type. And I was just kind of freaking out. I was wide awake, and I heard this rolling sound, like something bumped on the roof real loud and then rolled down like it was on wheels. And I jumped out of bed because I knew something was happening. I could not find this is kind of interesting. I'm going to tell you this story. Yeah. I couldn't locate anyone in the house. I snuck out real slowly, looking around. I just felt a presence, but then I looked across the kitchen. My cat was in the doorway, but she had both of her paws, one out in front and one behind, and was frozen. I mean, like she was in suspended animation for about 3 full minutes while I'm calling her and trying to get her to react to me. She did not look at me. She was just frozen, looking straight ahead. And then all of a sudden, she snapped out of it. And I looked, while I'm looking at her, I look at the front porch light, which is a motion activated light. It only comes on if there's motion. It was on. And then she snapped out of it and the porch light went out. And so I knew that I had just been visited, but I didn't know what happened. And I figured that they were probably just leaving, and I accidentally woke up because they made a noise on the roof. And that's what happened. But my husband completely knocked out and would not wake up.
Sounds like they altered the physics around you, right?
Oh, they did.
Right. I mean, so for me, I have never witnessed anything at all.
Really?
What put me on a pursuit to learn more is I'm one of these people. So I grew up Catholic, right? And as a kid, you hear the stories from the Catholic Bible, or the Bible as we know it. And even as a kid, I was like, this sounds like nonsense, And so you start thinking, like all humans do. Like at the end of the day, we're questioning our mortality. When we're questioning where we came from, the origins of us, and you look into space, and the more you learn about space, it's, for me as a kid, I was like, it's crazy to think that we're the only things alive. That's not, even if it's a plant, or even if it's another planet where they're in the Stone Age or they're Bronze Age, they're not advanced yet, but yet they're there. You're talking about just across our galaxy, the Milky Way, 100,000 years for a radio wave to cross that. We've only been broadcasting for 100 years. So I call these things into question my whole life. And it's not even that I believe or want to believe. I just know there's something more than us. It's impossible to think otherwise. And so 2017, the military videos release. And when I looked at the one with the Tic Tac, now, granted, I don't have a military background. I saw it. It seemed pretty fantastic. But when you actually study how fast that is, that thing came off lock, it's mind bending. Just for people to sit down and really understand the physics that it takes for that object to move to the left of the screen. And some people see it and they're like, well, that's not that fantastic. When you do the math and realize how fast that is from what you're seeing, it's pretty incredible. And then David Fravor, a trained pilot, and what he says and the engagement he has, there's no shot that he's lying. There's no shot this guy's lying. There's other military. So for me, that's when I said, I want to know more now. To be fair, I had to be responsible enough to myself to say, look, don't go to your grave questioning and just having a knowing. Go look, ask questions, and get out there. And so when I start hearing the different stories from people or different accounts, you put these things together, and undoubtedly something is definitely there. Now, here's what I think, Margie. I don't have the software. That's probably why I've never witnessed anything. I lack software.
No. You do have the software. You just have to wake it up, and it takes work to do it. I can train anyone to open their psychic center and remote view.
I want to connect you with Tony Civielli. I've had him on the show a few times. He does remote viewing as well. I think you and him would click. I even said it to him. I was going to introduce him. I said, I got to introduce you to Margie. All right. So I got to connect the two of you.
Okay.
Between the two of you, I plan to learn. I need to learn because I got to know. And often when I hear people like, well, be careful what you wish for. Well, I'm wishing, because I'm a negotiator. So that's the other question, Margie. Do you think, because I'd recently spoken to someone on the podcast where he was a non-believer and he called horseshit on it, and then he started having experiences and they haven't stopped.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, I just think it just takes a little bit to put someone over the edge. In other words, there's a real fine line between normal everyday consciousness and being in a light trance state. And if you can learn to do that, and you can learn. Anybody can learn how to do it if they stick to it.
Right.
And that's where the cool stuff happens. That's where telepathy occurs, and contact, and seeing things, and calling in UFOs. and having them show themselves and have an ET standing right in front of you. That's what it is, really. It's just a light trance state.
I have to agree with that. And I have to learn how to discipline myself to do that. I even try to meditate before, just normal things like exercise or shoot pool, just to give myself a calming. But I'm such a hyper person. My energy is ridiculous. I wake up at ridiculous energy, if you can imagine. Well, I'm sure you know. And some of the people I'd spoken to, this isn't the first guy, by the way. I've heard someone else say this too, where it was a gentleman who was trying to shoot down his grandson's idea on ufology. He's like, it's horseshit, and I'll prove it to you. And he bought some equipment and ended up finding something that altered him. That's another case. I'm finding a lot of these, Margie. These off podcast interviews, these smaller ones. I keep hearing the same story. I didn't believe in this nonsense, and now that I do, and not that they're believers and they're full force behind it. It seems like they're disturbed, like part of them has been broken, and I have a hard time understanding why that is. I mean, maybe the generation difference, you think?
That could have something to do with it, although I talk to people of all ages. But it's a shock the first time you come to realize, oh my gosh, we're not alone. And then it takes people a while to just process that thought. And then they start becoming usually more able to handle it. And then they want to see more. In fact, I have had several people just recently have an encounter or have a sighting, and it was the first time they've ever seen it. They were shocked, and they're, just having a hard time sleeping and having nightmares. And then after a couple of weeks, things calm down. And then they're like, I think this is kind of interesting. I think I want to know more. I want to see more.
Yeah. I hopefully that'll be the turn for me anyway, right? Because I'm not going to use the word unafraid or brave either. I think there it is. I'm stupid brave. There it is. I go investigate. I'm the guy that dies in a movie. I said this before. Like, what is that? Gotta know. So there's a lot, for me anyway, there's a lot of parallels with the paranormal and ufology. And I had this conversation with a relative of mine. They're like, well, what are you looking into exactly? I'm like, well, it's things that we consider abnormal, right? It's parallel to our normal. I think that's probably where the term comes from, or should anyhow. Mm-hmm. Why? Because it's not good enough for people to say, well, this is it. We are born, we're here, we get jobs, we have families, we die. That's not good enough. For me, there's got to be something more to the story. And that's not just in ufology to paranormal, even in like TV shows. If I like a show, I get involved with it, but I feel like there should be more depth to it. I'll stop watching it because it lacks that depth.
Oh, me too. Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah.
I might think something's neat for a while and then, now I'm done with this.
Yeah. Especially when you're figuring out the show mid-season on your own. Like, how it's going to end up. You're like, well, I guess I'm done with this.
Mm-hmm.
So you're moving, you've books on the paranormal, a lot of investigation on the paranormal. What are your findings in the paranormal so far? What are your thoughts?
Well, there's so many aspects to it. There's, under paranormal, you've got UFOs,
right,
poltergeists, ghosts, and spirits, and spirit guides, shadow people, portals, got all kinds of stuff. There is a lot going on. I investigate all of that, crop circles, animal mutilations, everything. And there's a lot of what we would call or term unexplained phenomena. It's just that we haven't figured it out yet. It is a thing. I mean, take crop circles, for instance.
Right.
There are so many different opinions on crop circles. We've got people who are experts in mathematics that have figured out all of these complicated mathematical formulas that tell a story about it. And then there are other people who visit the crop circles and they have experiences in them that they don't have elsewhere. And magical things happen. Sometimes people are instantly cured of some issue. And then we've got people who see balls of light making a crop circle, and they make it overnight or in a couple of hours. In one case, just recently, there was a pilot in England who flew over at an area. There was nothing there. About 40 minutes later, he's flying back, and there's a crop circle on the ground. And there's no tracks to or from it. How did that happen? We still don't know. We still don't know what the cause of that is. But I'm sure that eventually, someday, we will be able to understand these things, because very, very gradually, I've noticed over the last 40 years that people are getting a better understanding of things. And I think it's because they're open to the idea, and they have activated their psychic center, and they're willing to take a chance and communicate with whatever the energy is that surrounds it. So let's just take, for instance, there's a man in the Netherlands who gets a visit from an ET, and a telepathic communication happens. He sees a picture of a crop circle. He goes out, and he's also told where it's going to be. He goes out to the location, watches it being made in a lot of cases. Sometimes it's already made, but in others, he's watching it being created. And then he gets his camera out, and he does a form of psychic photography where he asks for whoever is there, whatever entity is there, to show up on the camera. And he takes a picture, and there's an ET there. Well, there could be someone else there who doesn't have his same abilities, takes pictures of the same space, nothing's on the camera.
It's a bizarre thing, because I'm starting to wonder in my head the crop formations. And I don't know that anyone's ever discussed this before, or if it's even been investigated this way, but is there ever like an incident where the crop formation shows up in an area, and then the surrounding area, paranormal events occur there more often for a time being anyway?
Not that I know of, no.
I want to look into that, because if you think about crop formation, so our U.S. military, to put it this way, when we're we're overseas, we typically find landmarks, or we create something for us to have as a landmark, to know how we're going to infiltrate or how we're going to conduct our campaign there. And so it makes me wonder if these things are placed out as a marker or a beacon for an area for them to, I don't know, utilize. Because I was talking to Steve Murr about this. You got a highly intelligent, much more sophisticated technologically beings. Whenever they're coming and going from here, where we are here on Earth, is their technology doing something that's manipulating perhaps the physics around it when they're coming and going and opening portals for other things that should not be here? Hints like ghost or even Bigfoot or just anything, these anomalies. Are they opening these doorways unknowingly? And if so,
I think you're on the right track. That is something that I think about a lot. And in fact, I just took a report last night of someone who saw a portal opening in the sky and a craft go into it. And then 20 minutes later, another one did that. And we have a building in Independence, Missouri, that I believe is creating a portal above it. And there are multiple UFO sightings around that building. So here, like you were saying, you have a created portal, and for the convenience of someone, probably ETs, based on the background of this thing.
Right.
And then what else comes in and out? Other things could come in and out easily because it's a dimensional portal.
Right. And when you're utilizing sophisticated technology, however it works in your realm, dimension, indoor, and space, may do different things here in Earth, like ionize the air around it and the physics. And humans, I remember being in school, you get spoons, some batteries, and you could create a magnetic field in a square and put a coin in and watch it flip around, now scale it up where we're making buildings to look cool. Like we make these buildings that they're squared in shape and there's these sculptures in the middle. You don't know what you just did. You don't know how that might affect the the physics around it. I mean,
well, this particular building, they darn well did know what they were doing, and they made a spiral with a gigantic antenna in it.
Huh.
And it was made for the purpose of contacting extraterrestrials.
I got to see that. I got to travel and see things like that.
Get online and just look up RLDS Temple in Independence, Missouri, and you'll see it. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh, wow.
Now, I've got inside information on that from 1968 is when I was told this was going to happen.
Yeah.
By my father, who heard the elders talking about it in the church.
That is a bizarre structure. I'm looking at a photo of it right now.
Yeah.
That is a bizarre structure.
Yeah. It's a gigantic antenna that's in a spiral shape. They were trying to figure out how to make this length of an antenna in order to contact ETs.
That is a bizarre looking building, like really bizarre.
Yeah. Extremely, and it does not go with the area. The area is very old, and the downtown Independence is, 1800s. Was started in 1820, and some of those buildings are from like 1870, 1880.
Yeah,
it doesn't go.
You can look at that building and know that wasn't made for comfort purposes, right? That had some other intention.
No, it definitely had, yeah. And there are so many UFO sightings around that.
I mean, that's point in case. There's the buildings in Dubai. They're learning that it's at the very top is that there's something, because of how tall it is, that the atmosphere itself is causing anomalies inside some of the rooms magnetically, and the pressure changes. Point I make is, if you create these buildings, and this is the unknowing factor, right? Humans do this. We'll make these buildings and it'll look dope, and you alter something, and you somehow either A, attract something there, or B, you open something and unknowingly. And it's going to catch the interest of a sophisticated intelligence as well. Like, how did they know to do that, whether it be X or not? There's no chance that we humans built the pyramids, in my opinion. Not with certainly not with the technology they had then, and certainly not with the technology we have today. There's no shot. So
yeah, I think they levitated those giant rocks and cut them apart with lasers, probably.
Yeah, I mean, it's so precise. Like we, if I'm not mistaken, an archaeologist on a program I watched, and I had to fact check this guy to make sure he was legit, not just one of the history channels like, well, our experts say he's legit. And he goes, I don't know that I can replicate this, in his own words. I was like, really? Mm-hmm. And he's compared the pyramid in Las Vegas and said that's a hollow structure with steel. Virtually, it's many times lighter, he said. So
no kidding.
There's no shot that we did this. And so we have to, and I tied this into the ancient Sumerians in their tablet. They depicted the solar system with great accuracy, Neptune and Pluto included in this tablet, long before a telescope. So something's at play here, and something's I don't know why people don't acknowledge this. It's, if you have a religion, again, make room for your almighty creator to say, hey, I'm creating everything. What, do you think you're special? You're just one project of many projects, So, Margie, let me ask, what do you think about the afterlife? What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm a firm believer in reincarnation, and I believe that the soul does not die when it crosses over, that, we have 7 bodies, and only the physical body dies and the others stay intact and stay together. And that's why a lot of times people will see a spirit appear, and they'll see them in that form that they were, just in, because they still have a light body. And I just don't think that you can kill a soul. The soul lives forever. And as we all of us have probably been reincarnated many thousands of times.
I agree with you. I'll tell you why. I think our soul and our consciousness are the same thing. I think it's just pure energy with data attached to it. And like you said, reincarnation is basically being recycled. Your body's here, your energy goes to some source, it gets reset and sent to a new body, or in some cases, like you said, it goes to the next plane as its identity. Because, and I say this a lot in the show, man, this kid amazed me to this day. A little kid who's 8, I think. And he's recalling accounts. And this is before the internet. This kid's recalling accounts of a pilot, that he was a pilot in World War II.
Oh yeah, I know that story.
With great detail. I mean, this is before the internet. Yeah. The guy wasn't in any books. He wasn't historically spoken about. Details.
Nope, and he got his name and everything.
Freaks me out, which lets me know, like your computer. We all have computers. You could take your computer right now, delete it, master reset it, delete all the information, but you could still get the information from it. There's still residual data there. Just like when we pass and you hit your energy, whether it gets reincarnated or it's recycled, there's still residual data there. And I think this kid, he got a new body with the energy, and some of the data from his previous life came up. It was there. And depending on how traumatic or not, like if it's a traumatic end of your life, the data is like, imagine the spike of data in a traumatic event. It's an enormous amount of data taken. Like it happened all at once. It was crazy. Versus someone who goes peacefully into the night at old age, and the data, it's a relaxed data. Does that make sense, Margie?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It does.
Yeah. So that's where I sit with it. So I think there's some, before the podcast, I'm going to be very honest. Before I started doing the podcast, I thought when you died, the lights turned off and that was it. Game over. I've evolved over the course of time. I've spoken to so many people, and when you hear,
oh yeah, when you get, have you ever been regressed?
I haven't.
Okay, that is fun. You should be regressed and go back and look at past lives. I've looked at several of my past lives. It's very interesting. And what I find most interesting is that in looking at my deaths in the past lives, it didn't mean anything. It was not upsetting.
Right.
It was just something that happened, and then I moved on to something else.
What about for me, I'm a very nostalgic person. I'm very attached to my life. I think that's another big reason why I'm questioning my mortality and looking into it. What about people like me? They're very nostalgic. They don't want to leave this alone. Are we the people that haunt and stick behind?
Yeah.
Yeah, it would make sense. Yeah, because I don't want to leave here. My poor relatives are in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had that because there's that other group of people. In so many words, like people who get shot, they die instantly. I think some of the hauntings and some of the energy residual is because they don't know what happened. They're confused. There was no stepping into the process of going back to a source, or, however, some people say relatives there to meet you or representatives. You died like that. And you're like, what just happened? What's going on? So you're confused and you're stuck behind. And that's why I hear some psychics say things like they kind of have to guide these people.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I've done a lot of that. I've helped a lot of people cross over because they either didn't realize they had passed on, or they thought that they had something to take care of, or a lot of times if somebody has been murdered, they feel very wronged and they want to have some justice. But if it's 200 years later, there's nothing you can do. So, I ask them to take a look at the light and look for their relatives and their spirit guide and go on, and they usually do. And then once in a while I run into a stubborn one that just is so attached to their house. This happens with older people especially. They feel so attached to it and their belongings that they don't want to leave it. They know they've passed on, but they're not ready to go.
Yeah, and a lot of it's perception though. Like, so they pass, and you new decor in the house, you put new stuff in there, but they don't perceive it that way. I say this a lot. Perception's huge. And so for a spirit or an energy that's passed on, they're seeing their house the way they see it. That's the, self-image in a sense. Because I'm going to be that pain in the ass. I'm certain of it. But
you're going to be the one that when somebody moves something and you don't like it, you're going to start moving objects.
Yeah. And I'm a fun person. I'll sing the same song to them all day long. Just to be interesting. But, like the light, a lot of people say, well, the light. And I think that's misunderstood as heaven. I think the light's the source, right? And maybe you call it heaven, maybe not, but our energy.
That's what I think.
Yeah, because if you look at our bodies, it makes prime sense for our body to be an avatar setup where the energy is put into it. All right, the body's decayed. It no longer functions well. Back to the source you go. And you had a good run here. And depending how you behaved here, what frequency you were at anyhow, is where you go next. All right, you're a jerk. We're going to recycle you. You got to start over again. Try before you go to the next level, right?
Yeah, it's a learning process.
Right.
I think it's all a school.
Yeah, a proving ground.
Experiences we have to have. in order to improve
which
and
makes
raise
me
our consciousness. I mean, here's the thing. When my mother passed, she contacted me a week later. I was surprised. I asked her what it was like on the other side, and she mentioned the source. She said everyone calls it the source. It's a light, and that you do not automatically have an understanding of everything the minute you cross over.
Right.
That you're on a continuing path of experiences and learning, and then whether you're going to stay in that spirit realm and do something there, or if you're going to reincarnate again, it's all, decided by you and your higher self, whatever you agree to. And I tend to believe that is the case.
Yeah, I want to agree with you because the universe is infinite. We're starting to learn this. There's our universe, and then there's bubbles of universes, plural. I sat down, Margie, one day, and I saw a documentary, and I read more about it. I felt really small. Like really small. Like when you realize that the tremendous size of some of the things out in the universe, plus what else, you feel insignificant. But that gives me the faith to believe that doesn't matter how many souls are produced, it's infinite because there's infinite places to be. And if there's an Earth here, believe there's an Earth elsewhere in many different universes or galaxies, etc. And we could be born to. There's many proving grounds, which. Here's the kicker, though. If our guests are the people that are observing us, or the beings observing us, have they figured out immortality? Are they downloading and uploading their consciousness and bypassing the whole source? I mean, some of them, not all of them clearly, but some of them. Because I've always had this kind of belief system that the Greys were, it's a biological robot with their consciousness uploaded. Because we have facilities right now, as we speak, here in this country and other countries, we're mapping a brain with that idea of uploading and downloading your data, right? Your consciousness, in a sense. Did they cheat death, right? And so their observation of us and many other planets that are proving grounds like us, this is why I think it could be an ongoing study. It's infinite.
I think you're on the right track there. I definitely think we're under a microscope. That's for sure.
Right. And there's comparisons. Look at today's scientists. When you go to a laboratory and you see there's rats in one cage and rats in another cage, they don't make them aware of each other, but they're all in different studies, right? You're observing all these different tanks of animals because one group of animals you're learning one thing from, another group you're learning another thing from, but you can never make them aware of one another because it would ruin the study. It would taint it. So that's where I'm sitting with that in perspective to that, because a friend of mine, and I have really interesting conversations at pool halls with friends at night sometimes.
Oh, I'll bet.
Yeah, they ask questions like, well, what do you think they are? It's like, well, I think the Greys, the taller ones I think are biological. Smaller ones I think are just biological robots with consciousness uploads, and they're the drones, the workers. And any other race of alien that comes here, they rent the little gray ones from the taller ones. So they're like, listen, these are proven. What study do you want to run here on Earth with this group of individuals? You could rent our Greys out. This is what they'll do for you. They'll take.
Well, you've really thought this through.
Yeah.
They're renting the Greys project.
Yeah, because it makes sense. Because what?
Yeah, because they don't seem to have any emotion.
Right.
The little ones.
Right.
But there's some that are like a medium size that I've seen that do have emotions, and they have expressions on their faces and wrinkles, and they look different ages. So I think those are real living biological creatures. And when
their time comes and they're going to decay and pass along, I think they upload their conscious somewhere and they could just throw them in one of the little Greys. You know what I mean? Like it would make sense that way. I mean, so this is what mankind's aspiring to. We're on route for that. Yeah. This is.
I know. That's kind of a scary thing.
It is.
I don't know if I'd want to put my consciousness in a robot so I could live forever, because I think I'm going to live forever anyway, and my consciousness is going to go on and just move into something else.
Yeah, but what if you could put your consciousness into a so when I say biological robot, like the internal parts are robotic, but the exterior is like a fleshy exterior.
Yeah.
And when it decays, it's time to build a new one, almost like how In other words, we're replicating exactly what life is, in a sense. But the grays, so many years ago, I read the book Communion when I was a kid. I snuck that book from my aunt, Whitley Strieber. I watched the movie, which scared the shit out of me.
Yes.
When you read his book and you read about what they do, and then you read about all the accounts from other people of experience, the smaller ones look at you in such a way where I'm under the impression that the eyes are sensors and scanners, right? And then the taller ones are the ones with the expression. And even then, when people don't realize either, is they're saying, well, they're talking with telepathy. Well, your brain has a natural receiver to it anyhow. We know that from our military. We experimented with the idea of shutting people down with sound waves. So all that I said, Margie, I'm led to believe they figured out some way of downloading, uploading consciousness, not just as an avatar, but to almost altogether bypass the death part.
Mm-hmm.
Creeps me out. So I don't know, Marge. What do you think of what for disclosure? I guess we'll wrap up on this because William Shatner went to space. The billionaires are going to space. I think that's some of the pressure why the government kind of has to speed up the process of letting us know things. Where do you think in the next 10 years, do you think we're going to know somewhat more from the government or no?
Oh, sure. Yeah, they're going to keep feeding us a little bit along the way, little bits and pieces. And, every time somebody starts making an uproar about it, they'll come with something. But I think the true disclosure is just happening anyway, right. And they're making themselves known.
Yeah.
It's like right now we're having a big UFO flap in the state of Missouri. And none of us have been able to figure out exactly what's going on yet. But multiple people are seeing the same craft. And we've had like 66 sightings in the last 90 days, 35 sightings in the last 30 days. So across the state and in clusters, we have a cluster in Kansas City, got a cluster in Cape Girardeau, which we hardly ever get reports from Cape Girardeau, but there's a cluster there. It's one in Joplin, and then oddly enough, following I-44 highway, which goes from St. Louis down through Springfield and then into Oklahoma. This is just an eye-opening thing. People all over the state are saying, what the heck is going on? There are people who've never seen anything before, and now in the last month or 2 or 3 months, they're seeing things. In fact, I've got a new case that I'm going to go see tomorrow night in Odessa, Missouri. This man and his wife are seeing UFOs and balls of light every single night. The balls of light, as many as 40 at a time, come up from the ground and go straight up. And there is a mothership that he sees with his binoculars with tiny ships around it. And they've only been seeing this for the last 2.5 weeks. They never saw a UFO before in their life, ever. And they are freaking out.
I got to tell you,
something is going on.
The balls of light and some of the orbs, I'm under the impression these are data collectors. That's what I get from that.
Really?
Well, because when people mention it to me, and whether it be paranormal, here's what I've stumbled onto in my thought process anyway. I always look at what we do, what our military does, and as it sits right now, we send drones out all the time. When we want recon, it used to be back in the day, we send some Marines out there. Now we have drones and we have satellites. So when you have sophisticated technology, a ball of light can collect, and we know to a certainty, light can transfer data and store data better than anything now. We know crystals too. So the orbs and these balls of lights, I think that's data collection for whatever they're for the ship they're going to let them know. Maybe this is a prime spot for us to go down and do some observation. Maybe there's a good candidate down there for to make our new experiencer or contactee. But at the end of the day, I think that's data collection because it seems to run in that order.
I will look at that aspect of it. Yes. I've been doing some research on different websites, and the first thing I did was think about earthquake lights. And it's not only this person in Odessa, but it's all over the state that this is happening. So I thought about earthquake lights. So I got a map of the fault lines, and those sightings are near fault lines. But there's another map I ran across from the U.S. Geological Survey that shows power lines, the power grid, and how it's moved around the state. And they also follow those lines. So then the theory comes in, are they using that? Are they getting power from those lines?
Huh.
Is that a possibility? So there's just a lot going on at once, and trying to just sort all this out and figure it out. There's, a group of us doing this, a group of field investigators we're all working together to try to figure this out. But it's just an incredible thing, because normally we get maybe, 10, 12 reports a month.
Yeah.
And,
have you spoken to Cheryl Costa?
I've spoken to her. I haven't spoken to her recently.
I love Cheryl Costa. She's coming on again Monday. She collects data.
She's a great researcher.
She's remarkable, and she's precise, and she's another one that makes me think. Every time I talk to her, I gotta think again, so I usually don't sleep those nights.
Yeah.
So in conclusion, I firmly believe, because of our billionaires and the race that they're starting to the stars, because Jeff Bezos' new thing is now he wants to set up shop on the moon too. Some sort of
sure he does.
If you could believe it, he wants to set up some sort of a vacation thing that you could go around the moon like a cruise, right? Where Elon's more focused on
the store, of course.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, listen, Margie, if tomorrow we found a planet in another star system that had life, biological life on it, and they had they had money, and they're complex in thought, he's sending Amazon there in a heartbeat. Yeah. That's his first. Well, what's your currency and how's it trade?
And then Vegas will get there and make a Vegas strip.
Yeah, and then before you know it, that planet's going to hate us. Like everything from Amazon breaks. Anyway, Margie, I had a pleasure talking with you. I look forward to doing it many more times.
Well, I appreciate it. And thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure talking with you.
Yep. And all your books and anything from Margie that you want to find, I'll put in description for links. So if anyone wants to find it, that'll be a place to find it. And anyone listening, we're going to say good night, good evening, good day, or whatever it is for you. I'm going to talk to Margie in post.